In the near future, humanity is going through a time of conflict and hope. Mankind is carrying out expeditions to the start looking for forms of intelligent life and the promise of progress. We meet the astronaut Major Roy McBride. While taking a psychological test, he explains he is calm and steady. Roy claims he is focused on doing his best. He will take pragmatic decisions without allowing his mind to linger on unimportant things, just the essential ones. Roy adds he won't rely on anyone or anything, nor is vulnerable to committing mistakes, and finishes the evaluation saying his BPM resting is 47. After that, an automated voice tells him that he has passed the test. As we listen to Roy's words, we can see a hue of dissatisfaction on his face and how distant he and his wife are. Roy heads outside to diagnose a robotic arm on the International Space Antenna that appears to be malfunctioning. As he goes there, we hear his voice saying that he has always wanted to be an astronaut for the future and progress of humanity. While Roy is approaching the unit he has to check, he hears some electrical humming followed by a heavy thud. Suddenly, Roy communicates through the radio that he is seeing a power surge on the post placed right next to Roy's. After seeing some other astronauts falling from the antenna, Roy decides to act fastly while he listens to desperate people on the radio telling him to get off the tower. Once he reaches the power source, Roy cuts the power, but it explodes anyways. Unfortunately, the chain explosion makes Roy fall from the tower and starts to spin. As he descends, he tries to establish communication with the radio and says that the atmosphere is too thin to stabilize. Since he is an experienced and skilled subject, he knows he has to keep the tumble down in order not to black out. Once he gets into the Earth's atmosphere, he unfolds his parachute, and even though some of the broken antenna parts puncture the parachute, Roy manages to land. Then, a group of soldiers goes to assist Roy and realize that he has survived. Later, Roy watches the news and discovers that some mysterious power surges of unknown origin are threatening the future of human life. One of these surges caused the immense disaster in the antenna. After surviving the incident, Roy McBride is informed by U.S. Space Command, SpaceCom, the United States Armed Forces branch operating in space, that due to the catastrophe, he is required to join them and have a secret meeting. Once at the reunion, Roy meets the Special Forces director, who looks impressed by Roy's qualifications and his ability to keep his heart beating under 80 even when in free fall into the Earth's atmosphere. We know that Roy has been married but hasn't had children. Then, they give Roy a spectrogram that shows cosmic explosions that have taken place in Neptune some days ago. The source of the surges has been traced to the Lima project base. Then, they ask Roy what he knows about that project. Roy replies that the Lima project was the first expedition sent to the furthest reaches of the solar system in search of intelligent life. It was 29 years ago and led by Clifford McBride, Roy's father and a famous pioneering astronaut who disappeared after 16 years in orbit around Neptune. Roy adds that after that no further expeditions were undertaken. Therefore, the officers inform Roy that they believe Clifford may still be alive near Neptune, but they don't know where exactly. SpaceCom members explain to Roy that the Lima project employed dark matter and that's what may have caused the surges. This energy is so powerful that can even eliminate every trace of life in the solar system. Due to that, Roy is tasked with the mission of traveling to Mars, which was the only subterranean base that hasn't been affected by the surges. The idea is Roy tries to establish communication with Clifford and sends him a personal pre-written message. The officers believe that Clifford may answer back and, in that way, track his location to solve this problem. Roy accepts the mission and is explained their long-range rockets are on the dark side of the moon where Roy will embark on his journey to Mars. Before Roy gets ready to travel to the moon, he is joined by an old associate of his father who is going with him, Colonel Pruitt. This man tells Roy that he knows him since he was a child and that his mental and emotional state will be controlled constantly. With a serious expression, Roy says he is doubtful about the possibility of his father being alive, but Colonel Pruitt, who was an astronaut for 31 years, mentions that maybe Clifford found a way to hide from them. After taking a commercial flight to the moon, Roy is sick of how the lunar base looks and mentions that if his father learned about it, he would destroy it. Roy and Colonel Pruitt are told there are pirates on the lunar surface, so they will be escorted by armed personnel to the SpaceCom lunar base, taking them across no man's land. Since there are no borders on the moon, some areas are at war because of the resources. The personnel also explains that as they are in the full moon phase, the hidden side of it will be completely dark. Before boarding the vehicle, Pruitt tells Roy that his father accused him of being a traitor just because Pruitt decided to leave the program. On their way to the base via lunar rovers, they are ambushed by scavenging pirates. The pirates attack them, killing most of the group except Roy, who only has holes punctured in his spacesuit, and Pruitt. After reaching the base, Pruitt presents an irregular heartbeat and is placed into intensive care. Pruitt tells Roy that he can't go to Mars with him and warns SpaceCom doesn't fully trust him. The dying Pruitt also says that Roy must continue with the mission and gives him a memory stick that Pruitt was given by Space Comm. Roy is extremely confused but takes the memory stick and carries out the mission. After that, Roy transfers to a Space Comm flight, crewed by 4 Space Comm officers, commanded by Captain Lawrence Tanner. The crew aboard the Cepheus, and before starting the trip Roy asks how Pruitt is. The captain tells that Pruitt is being operated, and then they fly to Mars. With the excuse of fixing the leak in his spacesuit, Roy goes to a separate room, and once alone, he sees the content of the memory stick Pruitt has given him. On it, Roy finds information about the Lima project state that shows an SOS signal had been detected. At that moment, Roy realizes Space Comm doesn't trust Clifford and they think that might have lost his sanity. Right before that, Roy remembers how important was his father. Clifford McBride was the first astronaut in Jupiter and Neptune. He also remembers his father's words telling Roy that he would come back to see him. During the journey to Mars, the ship receives a distress signal from a Norwegian biomedical research space station with a crew of 26 people. Captain Tanner explains that they are obliged to help them. Roy is not fully convinced and says someone else would help the crew and they should continue with their mission. However, the captain doesn't know about the mission, so he tells Roy that if he reveals what it's about, they could continue to Mars. Roy refuses to answer and offers himself to go with the captain to help the crew. Boarding the space station, Roy and Tanner find it abandoned. Suddenly, an aggressive baboon that escaped from the Norwegian station attacks Captain Tanner. Roy tries to help him, but another baboon appears and attacks Roy. Fortunately, Roy is able to escape and manages to lock both baboons in the airlock and kills them when depressurizing it. Finally, Roy comes back to their ship with the captain's body. Back in the Cepheus, the captain's body is analyzed, but the results show that he is dead. As a result, Roy is given another psychological evaluation. Roy recognizes that the baboon's attack was violent. He mentions that he has seen this anger in his father before. However, that wrath is also in him and all he sees is pain and suffering. Roy thinks that maybe that's why he can't love anyone and asserts that he doesn't want to be like his father. While preparing to make a routine landing on Mars, another power surge hits the ship, forcing manual intervention. The interim captain finds himself too scared to fly, leaving Roy to take the controls and land the ship safely. When they land and everyone is safe, Roy says he won't take credit for the landing and won't say anything about the interim captain's fear. Having landed on Mars, which appears to have only one man settlement, Roy first passes through the cold, moody customs office before being taken to the underground Space Comm base. There he briefly meets Helen Lantos, the facility's director, and is then tasked with recording voice messages to be sent to the Lima project in the hope that Clifford will respond. Using secure communications, Roy reads the message to his father. Roy affirms that Space Comm knows that the alterations are not Clifford's fault, but they want to take control over the situation and even offer a rescue mission. Unfortunately, they don't receive any response. After this session, Roy is alone in a room trying to decide if he wants to find his father or just get rid of him. Anyways, he realizes that he is being used at Space Comm's convenience. In the next session, Roy decides to try a different strategy. Instead of reading the pre-written speech, he goes a bit off script. Roy improvises and tells his father he would love to see him. Roy also mentions memories from his childhood. He says he is an astronaut who has given his whole life to space exploration and that he hopes to meet his father. The crew apparently receives a response, but is not revealed to Roy. Instead, he is abruptly taken off the mission because of his connection to Clifford. After that, Roy is said that he will be sent back home and, as his heartbeat goes over 80, he will have to take one more psychological test. Although Roy says he is happy to come back home and acts calmly during the evaluation, he doesn't pass because his personal connection to the mission is considered a psychological risk to himself and the mission's success. While being kept in a comfort room, Roy is visited by Lantos, who reveals she is a native Martian and has only been once to Earth as a child. Lantos asks Roy if he is there due to the surges, to which Roy replies that's classified information. Lantos then says Space Comm is sending the Cepheus fully loaded with a nuclear payload for the destruction mission of the Lima project base. She also reveals that she is the daughter of Lima project crew members, so they both are victims of the Lima consequences of this project. In a secret conversation, Lantos explains that there's a possibility of a huge disaster, but Space Comm has already determined that Roy is no longer allowed to participate in the mission. After that, she shows Roy classified footage from the Lima project. This video is about the SOS signal sent many years ago, and reveals that Clifford's crew attempted to take control of the ship and mutinied against him trying to return to Earth. Clifford mentions that this led him to kill them all by shutting down their life support systems. This decision, driven by the desire to find new forms of intelligent life, took the lives of the guilty and the innocent alike, including Lando's parents. Since Spacecom can't afford to have their reputation ruined, they covered it up by making Clifford McBride out to be a hero, but instead, he was a killer and now Roy has to live with that. After discovering the harsh truth, Roy realizes he is the only one who can confront his father, so he decides to take up arms and asks Lantos if there's a way to get into the ship traveling to Mars. She agrees to take him to the ship, but she couldn't get him in. Therefore, even though she knows Spacecom will be after her, Lantos takes Roy through a lake beneath the rocket launch site where he could sneak out of the base and get into the Cepheus. As the rocket takes off, Roy boards it and an alarm alerts the captain. Roy announces that it's just him and assures that he is not a menace, but the crew is ordered to neutralize him. Despite Roy's best efforts, the altercation ends in the death of the entire crew. Now alone, Roy takes command of the ship and sends a message explaining what has just happened. Although everything ends up with the whole crew dead, Roy affirms that wasn't his intention and that he is still fully committed to continuing with the mission. Finally, Roy claims that he would shut down any communication until he is near the objective of a long-lasting 79 days trip. During the long journey to Neptune, he reflects on his relationship with his father, as well as that of his estranged wife, Eve. The isolation and stress of the mission take a toll on his mental condition, but after several weeks he arrives at the Lima project. At that moment, he recovers the communication to Mars and indicates that the position of the Lima project has varied from the original coordinates. Roy takes the nuclear payload and boards a transport module to navigate between Neptune rings, leaving the Cepheus operated by the automatic pilot until finishing the mission. While approaching the base, another surge strikes, damaging the module. Roy tries to establish communication with his father, but he can't. Due to the damages suffered by the surge, the module can't be attached to the base, forcing Roy to enter through a spacewalk. Once inside, Roy wanders through the Lima project base, which is nearly abandoned and the bodies of its dead crew are floating around. As Roy is planning the nuclear payload, his father appears and finally meets him. Clifford McBride, now the sole survivor of the base, explains to his son that the cause of the surges is the ship's malfunctioning antimatter power source, which was damaged during the mutiny, and which he has been unable to solve. Roy tells his father he doesn't have to continue worrying about that, he is there to solve it and to take them back to Earth. However, Clifford says that there's nothing important for him on Earth. He claims he has never cared about his wife or Roy and has never thought of coming back. Although these words deeply hurt Roy, he tells his father he still loves him. Then, Clifford reveals that he has continued to work on the project all these years, refusing to lose faith in the possibility of non-human intelligent life. The father congratulates his son for having reached the base all alone and mentions that if the members of the crew had been more like Roy, they would have found what they were looking for. Despite his father's protests, Roy arms the payload and prepares to return to his ship with Clifford. Coming back to the Cepheus, Clifford activates his spacesuit's thrusters to launch himself into deep space and refuses to return to Earth. Roy desperately tries to save him, but Clifford refuses the help and tells his son to leave him. Roy insists on saving his father, but in the end, Clifford convinces Roy to let him go, leaving a distraught Roy to watch his father drift away in Neptune's orbit. Alone, Roy wonders what is the point of continuing with everything. However, he manages to thrust himself back onto his ship, going through Neptune's ring using a piece of the Lima project ship's hull to shield himself, while also bringing along with him the data retrieved from the base. Once in the Cepheus, he communicates with Mars base and says he is going to destroy the Lima project base to avoid more surges to damage Earth. Roy adds that, as he does not have enough fuel to return under his own power, he would use the shock wave from the nuclear explosion to propel the ship home. Finally, Roy encourages Spacecom to find a ship in case he doesn't survive in order not to lose all the Lima project data. Finding that this data strongly suggests that humans are the only intelligent life in the universe, Roy finds himself imbued with a renewed desire to reconnect with those closest to him. The shock waves drive Roy home, who lands in a military base and is rescued by soldiers. When he returns to Earth, he passes a new psychological evaluation after sleeping well and being stable. With a new sense of optimism, Roy decides to take care of his loved ones, determined to live and love. In the final scene, we see him in a bar waiting for his wife Eve, with whom he seems to be reconnecting.